Okay, we're all the way to Monday at 11:25, and we again meet with management and legal. There's things that we've learned that they need to know about. And this is actually, this is a recurring sort of thing. As you learn more, you realize you need to be informing people both laterally and upward. Management needs to know what's going on, and your team needs to know exactly what's going on as well. So we explain the problem, specifically with respect to our WERS site. We stop legal from running into the server room to hit the power switch because that's what they tried to do. We suggest that we fail whale the site until the rebuild. So essentially put up something saying, very simply, we're having technical difficulties, we'll have the site back up very quickly while we're doing the rebuild. And we see the new hard disk coming in the door as we say that, so timing is about right. Okay, so this can be done on a spare server. Actually, as a virtual machine, we can just rebuild it quickly in virtual space. Legal thinks it's better than additional hours of potential liability. Just shutting it down now, taking it out quickly. The skills needed here, accidental tripping of the legal team. It's better than grabbing him by the shoulder. Advanced understanding of server load characteristics to provide alternatives, for example, the fail well, to management, as well as good relationship building with people who own spares. This actually comes up not only in incident response, but in disaster recovery. One of the things you discover for area-wide events, like floods, tornadoes, hurricanes, is while your systems were damaged, everybody else's systems were damaged as well. And the next day, you're not the only person rebuilding their entire pile. Everybody is. Your relationships with these vendors, your contacts and the way that you worked with them often determine who gets to build their servers first, because there won't be enough wherever you may be to replace everything everybody lost. So, Monday, it's a little after noon, and we're smelling other people's lunch wafting from the lunchroom microwave, but realizing we are not going to be able to eat anytime soon. Make sure the fail whale is in place. Take down the offending server, pull the HDs, make sure we get an image of what's going on. If it's a VM, we might be able to do that virtually, just image the actual VM disk wherever it may reside. We discuss new hardening ideas. Remember, we're just rebuilding the thing as it stood without any knowledge of how it was compromised. So the idea here is, well, let's rebuild it, but let's take out whatever precautions we can imagine that might actually prevent this person from getting back in, even without knowledge of how they did it. And we call George, who's on vacation and maintains the firewalls, to ask what the heck is up with allowing port 64,223 outbound, because we've looked at the firewall and that has been allowed. Monday at 1:25. Reluctantly, we set aside the images, reluctantly because we'd really like to go take a look at them right now and see if we can figure out what's going on. And we discovered that the remote management of firewall is turned on from the outside interface. You can actually connect to our firewall currently from the internet and manage the firewall. We also discovered that the firewall rules are set not what we thought, but actually allowing port 22, the SSH port, inbound and everything outbound. So not only can we manage the firewall, we can manage other systems using SSH from the outside. A fine point of firewall rule sets, by the way, it's often default on a firewall to allow everything outbound. That is a mistake. Only allow those things which are absolutely required to go out. The thinking generally is if you're inside and you're trying to get out, we should allow that. In most entities, most corporate environments, really there's a limited number of things you should be able to do on the internet, and we should only allow those. Otherwise, you have no idea what is actually being done from the inside to the out. So the skills needed here are some self-restraint, because we really wanted to go look at that image, understanding of firewalls and firewall rules, general knowledge about IPs and protocol, and still hungry at 2:05, we convince Ed that he owes us after the latte incident, and give him money for a vendor lunch, ask for anything except egg-based sandwiches, because egg-based sandwiches are wrong. We called George again, leaving a message about the firewall status, because now we're concerned. We look at the firewall again. We realize something interesting. Someone's logged into the firewall from the outside. That's disturbing. We look up the IP address at Aaron, and it's an internet service provider in Florida, where George is vacationing. So the skills required here: understanding of how IP address lookups happen, how to go find this information, and we move on to looking for a backup of the firewall configuration, because we should have backups of all of our systems, and we find something from 3 months ago before the last reconfiguration. We decide to remove remote admin just because that seems silly and a bad idea. We log back in and see that a new IP address is connected, and this one is associated with a porn website in an island nation you've never heard of. Now we're very concerned. We removed remote admin immediately. It killed the oddball rules that we've noticed on the firewall. There's always a strong inclination to remove anything that looks odd on a firewall. Sometimes you want to make a little more time with this, because it may actually be a business required rule, and turning it off is going to suddenly complicate things. In this case, we determined the risk was too high. Went ahead and made the changes on the fly. So the skills required: we need to be able to recognize what an oddball rule could be. We need knowledge of DNS, Aaron, and web forensics to get from an IP address to a porn site in the island nation. We need to be able to tie all those pieces together. And by the way, not everybody who thinks they understand DNS actually understands DNS. A true understanding of how that mechanism works is beyond even most IT people who just run a DNS server. Some exploration and study in that area is recommended for anybody who does this kind of work for a living. So Ed shows up delivering a vending machine Monte Cristo sandwich with clotted cream on the side. George calls back finally from the happiest place on earth and says, I enabled remote access for while I was on vacation in case you had any firewall emergencies. I was logged in about 20 minutes ago and saw the odd rules too. Who made those changes? We have a very short, annoying talk with George, and on the upside, I realize I finally were going to get his office chair. So now we're to Monday at 3, we're in the afternoon, well into it. Call another meeting with legal, human resources, and management. Human resource, you'll notice, is a new addition to this list. We explain what George has done. We've surmised that most likely Mickey Mouse or characters unknown have shoulder surfed George and got the firewall login. Once the intruder had firewall access, the gates were open. They could really do anything at that point. We should never have had SSH loaded on that web server at all. We're going to reconsider that. But the other thing George admitted to us in our short conversation was that he used the same password on the firewall as he used as his administrative password on our web server. So by shoulder surfing that one password, Mickey Mouse or characters unknown now have access to everything that we have. By the way, I'm not specifically accusing Mickey Mouse of any criminal activity. He is just an example of somebody who might have been looking over George's shoulder. So we also tell management about the firewall login from a porn server on Island Nation A, we'll call them. They're not pleased. So myself, legal, and HR convinced management not to call George on vacation to fire him, But I realize he won't be needing his chair even for a second when he returns. We're going to turn him around at the door with his papers. So legal asks me to start gathering evidence just in case. And I get a few things. The network captures, the ARIN data about the outside logins, the firewall logs showing both Florida and some strange place we've never heard of, Whois and ARIN data regarding the forward lookups for hosts, and just do a little bit of DNS sleuthing here to get the pieces all put together. PTR records. In other words, the records that most people are familiar with is where you type in a name, www.whereami.com, and what you get back is an IP address. There is a reverse equivalent to that called PTR, which is actually, I type in an IP address and I get the name associated with that. In our data collection series, that is a part of what we want to know, because they don't necessarily always match. The IP address to name actually may go to a different name than the name to IP. There's no direct tie. We get the Whois information on both the PTR records, the IP address space, and the domain space. And in this case, we would actually look for proximity information too. We do trace routes to find out who is just upstream from the target IP. So in other words, who is their IP, or our ISP, who's providing services to them. We do a quick capture of the porn website, including metadata, redirects, and inbound links from Google. Again, so that if we do need to prosecute, since we now know the location of the attack, we have as much information as we might need later on. So later on, that same Monday at 4:05, we need an in-depth understanding of IP. That's a recurring circumstance here. In-depth understanding of DNS to get forward and reverse records, as well as some of the proximity data. In-depth understanding of internet registration databases, how to query them, where they are, and who has access to what. Some understanding of web spidering techniques, so you can actually do captures of entire websites. Web search engines to be able to find some of this information that's not readily available or published. So at 6:45, it's well past dinner time, and we're reconsidering the Monte Cristo at this point, because we've had a fair amount of caffeine and very little food. We package up the various forensic packages and burn that to a CD or DVD or whatever is large enough to encapsulate the capture, image the original disks to hard drives so that we actually have those, place the disks in a safe so that we know the chain of evidence is at least as controlled as we can keep it. Nobody has had an opportunity outside of our team to modify what's on that. We hide the Monte Cristo under some papers on Ed's desk. He deserves it. And we go home. So the skills required here, some knowledge of forensic procedure and very little to no fear of Ed. So what's left? Well, we're eventually going to get around to that forensic examination of the disks. We're going to take a look at what's on there, what more might be gained from looking at the files themselves. In a case like this, there's probably very little except for a full understanding of which rootkit was used to compromise you. And that's something we're very interested in, because as you recall, we rebuilt this system without full knowledge of how the attacker got in. We're pretty sure now he got in with passwords. And unfortunately, that person's passwords are no longer needed. So notification of copyright holders, for all of that stolen software, do we go tell these people that their software was stolen and downloaded by lots and lots of people? This is a legal question and one I'm not qualified to answer. We need to go grab George's desk chair because it's now ours. And anything else you might be able to imagine. This is at this point, ongoing investigation, and there's a lot of things we may not have figured out that we still need to do. So that'll conclude lecture number 2. And this time we do not have a specific assignment for next time. I'm going to give you a little bit of a break on that score. But please do the reading that was mentioned on slide 2 or 3, the FFIEC guidance on authentication. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.